without further ado, I would like to introduce our first presenter of the night, Simone.
One second. Okay, does it look good?
Yeah.
Everybody? Good. So hello, I am Simone, as you just heard. And I'm going to be talking about like art's influence in general on your daily life. So I know for like coming from me as an artist, it will seem kind of like obvious that I want to talk about art's influence or the influence I find in art. But this is kind of for those who don't necessarily like know how to get into art yet, or who feel like they have no place in the art world, or don't see the value of like the arts yet. And this is for them. So art is expression, art is self-discovery, and it also involves being vulnerable. And I feel like the last one is probably the biggest thing that keeps people away from art, because it kind of makes them uncomfortable, and they feel like they have to see things and understand things instead of just kind of being embracing it and just experiencing what's going on. So when I was making this, I want to show you my idea map, because when I was making this, I was thinking of just like creative thinking as a whole, and I wanted to talk about just creative thinking. But then I realized that like art is that art is the way to think creatively. So I should think of the influence that art has versus like trying to go off of creative thinking. So with that, I want to get into this quote by a philosopher, author, and educator, George F. Neeler. To think creatively, we must be able to look afresh at what we normally take for granted. And in other words, like to think creatively, we kind of have to ask the why and why not questions. So to emphasize the importance of thinking creatively, consider like these things. So when facing major problems or at times of change, and when something new is needed, but you're not sure when, those are times when you would use creative thinking. And again, I feel like most of us are artists, so like we kind of already doing this, but like I have a lot of people in my life who aren't, and I feel like this is important to share to them. So these are some reasons to think creatively. And ways of thinking creative. So like all these ways of thinking creative occur naturally when you kind of let the arts consume you, or when you let the arts into your life. So I feel like this was a good starting point. Even though I wanted to talk about thinking creatively as a whole, I think the arts in general is a great starting point. So the arts for all is my main point. And whether you're making it or like just appreciating it, and I feel like music is the one art form that everybody kind of like knows, they're comfortable with, they talk about. And I'm glad that happens. But I think when it comes to visual art, people tend to feel like they can do things wrong, or they can talk about it wrong, or they can look at it wrong, instead of just like embracing it. And the most important thing to know is that art is truly for everyone. You don't have to exactly know what you're looking at, you just have to experience it and be there in the moment. So art helps us develop a deeper, more compassionate, open-minded experience. And I know people don't like doing crafts, but crafts and DIY projects are like a really good starting point. And I feel like hacks, kind of like the 5-minute hacks that you see on social media, they kind of took over. So people tend to not necessarily think of like DIYs or crafty things as like art, but it is. It's definitely art. It's a form of expression, and it's something that you took the time to make. So start crafting. Most of us are already crafting, but if you're not, start crafting, start doing DIY projects. Like just throw things up or out, just start making. Because you're never too old to start creating. You're never too old to make art. You're never too old to enjoy art. And I want to share this study that I found while I was doing my research for the paper. So a clinic in Minnesota, Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, they were doing a study on like the age range from 60 to 80 on some of their patients. And they were introducing them to art for like the first time. This was their first time being introduced to art or like doing art themselves. And what they found was the fact that working with art kind of helped them like, it helped mind slips and it helped them like work out their brain basically. And these are people from 60 to 80 who've never like, you know, started doing work. And now we're seeing patterns of like their brain, well, their memory improving due to the fact that they're constantly creating and making art. So art exercises your brain and it kind of keeps your brain cells stimulated. And because it focuses your attention on like something you're doing with your hands, or even if you are making music or just listening to music, something like that. But like it keeps you focused when you're making art. And it's also a great way to connect with your family. So if you're like, well, I don't really feel like doing it right now, or I don't really feel like doing it in general, it's a great way to connect with your family. So you can kind of think of it that way, like, let's bring this into the house. So bringing art into the household. And when I was younger, my dad used to, well, he still keeps art in the house, but he used to keep art in the house. And I would always see it, and I was like 7 years old, so I wasn't asking questions about the art, I was just enjoying it. And I also didn't have dreams of being an artist. I think I had dreams of being an astronaut at the time. But because like he would keep art in the house and I would see it, I would start making like these, like on copy paper, I would just start drawing patterns and then gluing them to the ceiling to eventually like cover the whole ceiling, just because like I was mimicking all of the art I saw in his house. And he's nowhere like an artist. If anything, like this presentation would be for him. But because of that, like I started to get involved in art, and it kind of changed the way like I started viewing things, and I started becoming more, I mean, I was already watching cartoons, but like visually stimulating things is like what I would be drawn to because of all of the art he used to hang in his room or in his house. So yeah, if anything, just if you can take anything away from this, do it for the children, because they're children. They're gonna enjoy it. But also you can enjoy it with them. And there's this really lovely quote that I found. There was this study where this author was asking people on Facebook, like, why is art important to your family? I'm gonna read this quote. She said, "If I sit down at the table and start creating, it's never long before the kids join me with their own endeavors. My husband is not artistic, but a brilliant computer programmer, and will often join us at the table with his laptop. These are my absolute favorite family moments. Art brings us together." And I think that's just like, all of the comments were kind of like that, but like, this is just really beautiful because it does. And they're all doing their own thing. Like, they're not working on one thing. They're just kind of doing whatever. And her children were influenced and inspired by what she was making, and the fact that she would take the time to make art. So then they wanted to. So then her husband would come and like work on his computer beside her. Even though he wasn't making art, he was still inspired and just like involved with his family, and they were all enjoying each other. So I think that's really beautiful that art can do that, because I mean, there's other ways that can do that, but not the way art can, because art is just extremely accessible. You know, it can just be a piece of paper and a pencil, literally. And I think that's especially important for like children, because it really helps them like foster positive mental health and allows them to express themselves individually in a unique way, and it kind of shows them like that they can accomplish things even if it's small. So with that, so with that, I say sit down at the table and like do a puzzle, I know people don't like puzzles, but even like an app or or the toys that your child may have. Like I know a lot of us, well, I don't have children, sorry, but I know a lot of people who do have children in their lives, like there's toys around, and the toys are supposed to be like, they're supposed to help them like work on their cognition skills and movement. But it also can just be a starting ground for you to like be creative. Like if they have blocks, you can start building with the block. You can build with them. You can show them something with the blocks, like things like that. I feel like we shouldn't necessarily take advantage of that, which then brings me back to the quote in the beginning: to think creatively, we must be able to look afresh at what we normally take for granted. So that would be like the things that you have in your household that your children already have, like using those things to start thinking, to start making, and to start thinking creatively and getting them to do the same thing. Because then, like my dad unintentionally did, like they'll start developing good creative thinking habits, just kind of naturally because they're involved in it. And last thing I would like to say, so including art into your daily life will help you see others' perspective, whether you're making it or just enjoying it. And I think that's especially important right now to help everybody to give everybody the ability to think more open-minded. And I don't think that would ever hurt.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you, Simone. This very, very inspiring. And I have to say, I absolutely love the idea of, I wrote in the chat, like the infectious quality of art making, of like, there's almost like this contagion effect of like, wait, if you just sit there and you just start making something, then other people can come to the table and do that. And I think that's, you know, like, and I also really love the idea of just letting it occur naturally. Mm-hmm. Right? Like starting where the art is already naturally occurring, and like start where people are. And even just by like hanging things up on the walls is just,
Great start.
Like, yeah. So just pick a place and start. I love it. Yeah. I love it. Well, so thank you so much for going first, because that's always never the easiest thing to do. And if we have questions and things for Simone, if you guys don't mind either putting them in the chat, or we can also kind of save it a little bit to the end, because we'll keep things rolling for right now. And